Good evening. Welcome to the Laugh Monkey Music Show, Adam. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm glad you could make it. You've been in a plethora of bands, and you're also producing and doing a lot of things. But let's get a little rundown of what you've done because you've been in so many different bands. Just you've done LA Guns would be, selling you way too short. You have some fantastic production skills. You're doing a lot of you do a lot of TV work, and you've done a lot of bands. So maybe just do a quick little bullet point, if you could, of
Yeah,
like.
it's kind of strange, a lot of times when you get into like music business, everybody seems to have that one genre they work in. But when I was a kid, I loved the 80s, the Buggles and all that 80s
Mhm.
pop stuff so much. And then the late 80s came around and I loved all the metal stuff. And I've just always loved everything music. And so that kind of translated to like my career as I just kind of produce and I play with all sorts of different people. I mean, I've produced everybody from, you know, worked with LA Guns to Vanilla Ice to William Shatner and David Hasselhoff to Missing Persons in Berlin, a lot of 80s stuff. And then again, I worked with Nick from the Strokes and Brian Jonestown Massacre and some alt stuff to the right to the other side of it. So, you know, I love so many different kinds of music and always embraced that. And I've just kind of been blessed with being able to kind of like just kind of go from one project to the next and it doesn't seem to really be a theme tying it all together other than the only
Music.
real theme I can figure out is just music. Yeah, the only really theme is like is if I enjoy something and then I get the opportunity to do it, I'm like, fantastic, I love this band, this will be great to work with them,
Yeah.
and then you work with them and then on to something else, and sometimes it seems like it's a real left turn or right turn, but it's like I love that kind of music, so this would be great. So I just kind of go with the flow, and it always ends up being an interesting journey for sure.
So where did you get your start? So I know you play every instrument too, which is awesome for a producer because
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very proficient in keyboards, but Pro Tools makes it really easy to make it sound like you're really great these days. So,
yeah,
but I started
but like
playing
being a good
drums when I
songwriter
was,
it helps.
yeah, and I started playing drums when I was 3, and then got bored and played guitar and then bass, and so and just kept playing it all. So now, like in a week, I may do drum sessions for different people and bass sessions for another, or be producing a record where I get to play all that, or maybe I'm producing or mixing a record where I don't play any of it. It's just the band playing. So it's fun to get to do all that, and it's fun to have those tools in the wheelhouse when I need them. Uh, but I also like will maybe be doing a record and I'm like, man, I need a shredding guitar part. And I called Patrick Kinnison, my buddy from Lita Ford's band. And I'm like, hey, can you put something great on
Yeah.
this? And he's like, give me 20 minutes. And then he sends me a file back or Tracy Guns or any of my buddies
Mhm.
that have a whole nother set of tools and a bigger wheelhouse than I do. So it's nice to be able to know and to be able to pull those guys in for different things.
Well,
But
yeah,
yeah,
and those are two really good guitar players too.
oh yeah, they're two of my favorite people and two of my favorite guitar players.
And I hope Patrick gets more recognition as time goes on. I think he should be
Yep,
bigger. You know,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
and vocally too. His voices they say it's ridiculous. He's awesome.
I did a record in 2011 for William Shatner called Seeking Major Tom, and we did a cover of Bohemian Rhapsody. And that was like, how am I going to do this? And the first thing I do
Hmm.
is I picked up the phone to Patrick. I'm like, help, I need you. And he's like, he's coming over and singing all the harmonies and
Yeah,
adding all the great Brian May guitar parts. And I couldn't have done it without him. I mean, he was the star of the show on that track. So,
yeah. They have a good covered album too, and
oh
that they
yeah.
do. If
Oh,
you
absolutely.
heard it, actually, yeah. He's one of the first people I interviewed, actually.
Oh yeah. Patrick's the best. Patrick and
Fantastic.
Nikki
He's
are
yeah.
awesome. Nice.
Um, so you first start. So how did you first get in? Because obviously you started doing a little bit, because you do a lot of work with a lot of people. So now you're kind of like Scott Coogan. A lot of you guys working with a lot of other people. But when
Yep.
you first got here, I think was it you met CC DeVille at a club or something? It kind of brought you over
Yeah,
to LA to
CC
this
brought me
music
out.
scene.
I met CC in a club at Austin, and he told me he was getting ready to quit Poison and wanted to do a solo band, and he wanted me to be the drummer. So he moved me out, and we tried to put this band together and got pictures in all the magazines, and we lived with him and rehearsed for about 3 or 4 months, and nothing ever happened. We just partied all night, took photo sessions for magazines in the daytime, And then after 4 months, I'm like, I got to get out of here, man. I'm going to go crazy. You know, this is not going in a healthy
There was no
direction.
singles because I thought he had like a single. Did he have like
He
Hey We're
did.
Good Looking
He
or
did.
whatever? That one,
That was
right?
after us. That was with
Oh,
Kelly.
after that, okay,
Yeah, that was with Kelly and Tommy Hendricks and James Kotek
okay.
for that movie, The Son-in-Law. But that was after us.
I
That
just,
was after.
when you said that, I just remembered that song and the
Yeah,
connection to that. So
yeah. But I got out of there and I kind of like regrouped and did some projects for a few years and then came back out to LA in 95 to begin. But actually in 95, I moved out with a gig already. I was going to be the drummer for Tommy Thayer's band they were called Shake the Faith, but they had just changed their name to Number Nine, and it was Tommy Thayer and Kenny Queens from Beautiful Creatures,
mhm.
and Dave Aragon, the guy from Pimp My Ride, um, and a couple of guys, and it was like a real kind of snotty punk band. And so I moved out with a gig, so that was nice. I moved out going, okay, at least I know I'm going to have some guys to meet up with and play with and meet other people and network through, and we'll see what happens with this band. And then once I got out here, that band kind of fell apart. And one night I was at the Viper Room and I saw Blues Saraceno, and he and I kind of hit up a conversation, and I was telling him how I had played with Poison and he was still in Poison. And we said, well, we should do a side band. And he said, great. So we started a band, and then that fizzled out. And then I got in another band. That's the way LA works, man. You just come out here and get in the right place at the right time, and things just start to happen, It's pretty funny.
That must have been great. I would have loved to heard what you and Blues had going on though. He's another
Oh
one. It's
man.
just
Yeah, he's incredible, man. He's so talented and he's hysterically funny and so smart. And yeah, we had some fun. But I got a gig with a band that was signed on Warner Brothers, and I loved their first single. And they were looking for a drummer, and so I knew Blues was kind of doing Poison, and we weren't really able to put too much time and energy into the side band because we were all trying to, we were all hustling. Um, and so when I found out about this audition, I went on it and I got the gig. So I ended up joining that band, and they were at the time they were called God's Child, and they were signed on Warner Brothers, and they had a single out and it did pretty well, their first album. So I got it in the band and we went off on tour, and I had to tell Blues, I said, I got to go. And he's like, yeah, I understand. But I think he kind of still harbors a little bit of a resentment of me bailing out, but it is what it is. You got to do. He understood. He understands,
I mean he had Poison, so
Yeah. I think that thing was kind of winding down and coming to an end, and it was time for him to do something else too. And then he segued right into doing music for TV and film too. I mean, it would blow your mind if you knew how many tracks you hear and stuff on TV that is
really.
him. Oh, incredible. He's incredible. Yeah.
I'm glad to see you guys doing other stuff besides that one thing. I mean,
Yeah, me too. I
it's
mean,
kind of weird.
and when I was a kid, I would sit with my guitar and I would watch the TV with the sound down and just kind of play along. And I'd be like, oh, I got a great piece of music for this scene. And I didn't realize it. What I was literally doing is, like, as a kid, I was scoring the picture. And so I just kind of somehow managed to, that became my part-time job, of actually doing that for real out here. But, I kind of intrinsically or instinctually, I don't know what the word is, was doing that on my own. So it's kind of one of those things where it was always something I wanted to do.
So like your production stuff, where'd you learn all the production skills? I mean, because like there's
You
schools,
know,
there's learning on your own. Like I went to school for it, didn't do anything with it, but like
yeah.
I feel like you probably did a lot of hands-on.
Well, when I was a kid, when I was like 10 or 11, I was the kid that had the 4-track recorder, before Pro Tools and laptops and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I would come over to your house and set up and tape your band and record your
Hmm.
band and make you a little 4-track demo or whatever. So that's how it started. I just loved doing that.
I
I
went
just
too.
loved it. I still love it. I'm a complete audio nerd. And then through the years, I got to work on records with Andy Johns. I got to make 3 records with him and with Don Was and all these great producers. And I just learned from them. I
Mhm.
just I would take notes. I would act like a sponge and absorb everything I could. And I would sit quietly. And I learned the studio etiquette of don't say anything and disrupt the vibe, but do jump when they need you to do something, and got to be real helpful. And I just had a lot of mentors, a lot of great mentors that helped teach me. I mean, I still know so little in the big picture, in the grand scheme of things. People will be talking about, oh, I love the KM87 microphone, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Let me look it up. but I know what I need to do to do what I do, and I'm just constantly trying to learn more every day, but still trying to stay humble enough, knowing that like, man, there are people out there that just, that they really know what they're doing. I'm just kind of getting by with it.
Well, yeah, well, sometimes there's skill, and then there's also communication, and then there's just knowing what to do with the skill. I mean,
Absolutely.
you
And
know,
that's one thing that I learned about working with people and watching other great producers is sometimes it has not, sometimes you're just being a cheerleader, sometimes you're being a therapist, sometimes you're being a mediator, and sometimes you're helping pick songs and rearrange parts, and maybe you're a co-writer, maybe you're and sometimes I'm literally working with bands and I look at the way the drummer's playing and I'm like, no wonder he's not grooving or can't keep time. I look at his mechanics and they're completely off, and you literally have to strip it down, take the car, put it in the garage and take the wheels off and like look at what's wrong and then put it back together so it runs great, and I'm literally helping drummers going, raise your seat 2 inches, it's gonna help you and it's not gonna hurt your back anymore, and helping them learn like to make a record, there's just so much that goes in it. It's like making a movie. Obviously there's more that goes into a movie, but it's so much more than just the music, there's just so many nuts and bolts and pieces, and I just love every part of it.
that's where I think that you being a musician really helps out, though, and that would be
Absolutely.
like, and if you're working with a producer and they see you doing all that stuff, you're an asset to them. You add something to them at least,
Absolutely. And I think they
you know.
can. I think musicians will trust other musicians more than they will if somebody comes in and you're like, "What do you mean you can't even play a G chord?" Not some great producers can't, like Rick Rubin and people like that. But that's not to say that he's not an amazing producer. Obviously, he's successful. So, But I agree with you. I think sharing that common language is important and an asset.
Oh, what I've learned even more is, of different producers, because I've been in geek, like I said, recording and stuff on and off my life too, and be the guy reading on liner notes. Desmond Child was the song, and who's the
Yeah,
songwriters for this, and who's the producers on these albums back when I was a teenager.
of course.
And certain producers when we grew up had a certain sound,
Yep.
especially there's like 4 or 5 of them that had a certain sound.
Absolutely.
You had Ted Templeman, but Ted Templeman's strength was he was a musician, and he could go in and sing and do harmonies, and he did a lot of vocal arrangements, which that was his strength. With besides Van Halen and Nirvana and Doobie Brothers, and then you got like Mutt Lange had a different way, like, and they all have a different way. And then Bob Rock got really big because he came with a really great drum sound that we hadn't heard since Zeppelin,
Yep.
commercially rather.
Yep.
He put it out there commercially, and you really got to help focus. But then I look back at some of these great producers, and I could say David Foster's a songwriter. He does some producing of some stuff too, a songwriting arrangement
Oh,
in the studio.
yeah.
But once again, amazing musician.
Yeah.
You
He
know,
started out a studio
right,
musician.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And you go back to Bob Rock, was a musician. I mean, his band didn't make it big,
Yep.
but he was a musician.
Yep.
Um, and the more I realize it, so these albums come out with these people, and I think the albums that almost show a different sound. Like some producers that I think that don't play instruments have a sound that they like, and it kind of becomes their sound. But musicians that are producers, I feel like they're kind of like they meld in with the band and kind of help make the band better. So a lot of those guys don't have a certain sound where I'm like, oh, that's so and so sound.
Right.
It's really the band kind of keeps their sound but gets better.
Right.
And that's my outside thought on
Yeah. I mean,
as
that's
I,
what
as
I
I
try.
learn.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. I try to approach it like when I'm working with a band for a record, I'm like, first of all, this isn't my record. This is their record. And it's not
Mhm.
about me imprinting my thumbprint on this band and making my sound. It's about their sound. So how do I
Mhm.
make their sound the best it can possibly be? And sometimes that means just getting out of their way and let them do it, let them do what they know how to do, and sitting back and saying, this is great. I'll give you my opinion if you want it. Otherwise, just keep doing what you're doing.
I think it was one of the bigger crimes back in the 80s, 90s with bands, but they say, oh, we need that Bob Rock
Yep.
sound. And I know it happened to a couple bands too that they sent there, and they weren't Bob Rock bands. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yep.
nothing to him. He's great at that, but they were just a different band. You know,
Yep. Yep.
and that would be the sin of trying to like mass produce. The record companies looking to make the
Yeah.
money, and they're back in their investment
Yeah. I
and
mean,
not
that's the
allowing an
thing,
artist
man.
to grow.
It's the music business, and it's not just about music, unfortunately. When you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars, I mean, millions of dollars on the line, there's a lot of pressure, and we don't have that anymore. And I feel like that lack of pressure is one of the one of the benefits of the way things are today, you know.
Hmm. I think it's helped a lot of bands from our genre to come back out again and be able to record good albums because the resources are different, so they don't need a monster budget for
Yep,
no reason. They can pay
absolutely.
for somebody else can get paid for doing a good job work and still live, but
Yep.
they don't need to be, driving an 18 Ferraris, like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
but
Let's
they still go, yeah, you still get good artists, and then it's allowing these artists to come back out again that were screwed over. And I think, a lot of artists have some really good albums that come out now in the past couple years.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So good, so good. Um, so speaking actually of artists, and actually, LA Guns was one of the bands
Yep.
of the resurgence. And, and actually, go step back even further. I think rock's had more of a resurgence past while. I think it was kind of creeping out between, and probably some of the bands you'd actually done some stuff with Beautiful Creatures, because it was kind of struggling between Bang Tango, then did Beautiful Creatures, kind of kept some breath to it. Brides of Destruction kind of kept the rocking going, because I know around that time, LA Guns was going through some stuff.
Yeah.
So those were kind of like, to me, those were kind of some staple rock bands when there weren't a lot of new rock bands coming out without
Absolutely. Yep.
being alternative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they were coming out at a time when it had definitely dipped down, and that was a tough time. That was the time when a lot of people bailed off the ship. They like,
Yeah.
the ship's going down. Better figure out what I'm going to do next. And not everybody's a lifer. Not everybody's built to do this forever.
Right.
I mean, I know
And
I wasn't built to stay on the road all these years. I tried it 2 years ago, going out with LA Guns as a rhythm guitar player before Ace joined the band, and I was like,
yeah.
this is a young man's game, man. Plus
Well, had you gone out before though? You were with them for a while, so you didn't tour a
I was
lot
with him
before.
for almost 10 years, and then quit the band for almost 10 years and was just producing in the studio. And then before Ace joined the band, they had a guy named Michael Grant as the guitar player.
Yep.
And when Michael was out, they needed somebody for a European tour. So they pulled me in, and I went and did it with them. Went out for about 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Yeah,
definitely a young man's game. And as a guy who has a young daughter, I was just like, man, I'm a homebody these days. The road life is not for everybody.
I couldn't have seen doing it past my 20s. I would have been like, nope.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard.
Actually, by my mid 20s, I would have been done. I would have been okay, like during my college years, and that's it.
Yep.
Couldn't have
Yep.
done it. I don't know how these people can still do. I have such respect,
Yep. More power to them, man. Much respect, because it's a tough life being on the road. Absolutely.
And it's like LA Guns has been a training school now for people too. It feels like just,
Yep.
I actually funny when I talk to people, I interview them, and I was in LA Guns. I almost like I should get like a badge or a checklist or something here for the amount of people have been in it.
Yep. There has been a lot of members through the years, for sure.
But that being said, I mean, just like it's like a job, and I've always said this, whatever it takes to keep the band going. It's the band. It's like, you don't do the same thing every day for your job, or, people get divorced and move on and kids and stuff. So, life changes. And the good thing is it kept LA Guns afloat.
Yep, absolutely.
And now that, Tracy and Phil together, the way they came back, the past couple albums, like, are ridiculous. Like, I say almost good or better than they were.
I know. They got the fire back, man. The fire and the magic is back. I love it.
Yeah.
We're working on one right now that's blowing my mind. It's going to be amazing. So
yeah. Oh, so you're working with them right now? Good.
Yeah. We did that first single called "Let You Down," like right when the pandemic hit, and I ended up having to play drums on it because Scott Coogan, everybody was in quarantine, and it was when it all first happened, and nobody was going anywhere, and so I ended up playing drums and mixing it. But now, I'm probably going to play drums on a few other songs, but it's going to be great. I'm mixing it for them, so I'm excited about it.
They're putting out albums. It feels like almost like every 4 months. no, but seriously, it feels like they faster than any band right now is putting out albums.
Yeah, well, back in the day, remember every band put out a record every year. They would put an album out and do a tour, and then go write a record and record it and put it out, and that was the yearly cycle, And
that's how you could tell who the band was, because at some point, which bands could go and down. You know what I'm saying? But like these albums, each one is just getting better and better and better. And and it's not young in this field. So they've been doing this for a while. So you keep going out with stronger albums that hold against your other ones.
Yeah.
Your legacy work,
Yeah.
And that's an unforgiving group. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything bad about these past couple albums online. And there's some places that say, there's some 10 people in the basement that say some really bad things about these things. And they're all like, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it really is great. It's just undeniably great. You know, I sometimes things just are what they are, and these guys have it, man. They really found like a second life. Absolutely.
That's excellent. I'm glad you're still with them doing stuff, producing them and
Me,
stuff too. It's
yeah,
really cool.
me too. Because I didn't work on the Missing Piece album, and I was so sad because I hadn't, really. I kept in touch with Phil, and I worked
Yeah.
with him and those guys on the Hollywood Forever album. I actually co-wrote a couple of songs on that with them. Uh, but I hadn't talked to Tracy in a couple of years. And so I reconnected with him. And when we did, it was great. I miss those guys so much. So I'm glad. I'm so happy to be working with them again now.
Oh, that's really good. It's really cool. So while we're talking about production, you've done a couple of things. Let's talk about the Brian Jones Massacre.
Yeah.
That is such an interesting group, and I know if you don't know them, people just look them up because to get into the history is just it'd be exhausting. Go to
Yep.
Wikipedia or wherever.
Yep.
How did you end up with them, and what was that
You
like?
know, when I played on their I played on two albums, drums, and the way I joined was before Muddy, who I took Muddy's place in LA Guns as the bass
Mhm.
player. Before Muddy was in LA Guns, or I was in LA Guns, Muddy was doing a lot of, he's a great producer himself. And so Muddy and I had been friends, and I knew him from the studio and absolutely loved him. Still do. He and I are working on a project together, producing other people right now too. But Muddy calls me one night and he goes, "Hey, come up to this house in the Hollywood Hills." He gave me the address where the studio is. "I'm making a record with a band." And they're like 1960s hippies, like Rolling Stones, falling down drunk on acid.
Yeah.
They look like they're like right out of Haight Ashbury, which they are, and they look like we're trying to make a record and their drummer just passed out. "Come up to the studio, bring your sticks, the drums are here." And so I literally get in my car at 9 o'clock at night, drive up the Hollywood Hills to this studio, and there are all these like crazy looking hippie people outside smoking, and it was this total tripped out scene, like right out of a Fellini movie. And Muddy comes out and he grabs me, he goes, "Great, thanks for coming." And literally they're carrying the drummer out, and he's just like literally dragging his feet. And so he's like, "This is my buddy Adam, he's gonna help us finish the album." And they're like, "Oh, cool, thanks for coming." And everybody was a little suspect, but Muddy was like, "Listen, do you guys want to finish this album or not? Adam's a great drummer." And they're like, "Okay, cool." So we literally put on headphones and they start showing me the songs and we just start recording. And it was really right out of a movie. It was just like it all started to flow. It was all magic, and it was just this trippy 60s psychedelic music. And I was like, "This is so cool." But it was also very shambolic, where it was just at any moment it's just going to completely fall apart. And if you know that band or you learn about them and you see
Yep.
that documentary
That
Dig about
documentaries.
them,
Yeah. Yeah.
you'll see that that's what makes it so great. Is at any second it might implode, and it might
Mhm.
implode a couple of times a night. And it didn't while I was there. I cut the drums on that record and it worked out great. And so came time for the next record, and those guys had kind of gone up a notch and people were starting to know who they were, and they were getting some notoriety and success. So they rented this giant house in Echo Park to do the album in, and Muddy was again producing. And so Muddy said, "I want to bring Adam into play." And they said, "Hey, he's great, bring him in." So that's how I got the gig playing on those. Is Muddy was producing, and Muddy brought me in, and I got to spend the month cutting drums on the Strung Out in Heaven album with those guys. And they asked me to join the band after that album, and this was during the Dig uh, shoot, where there was cameras all around, and we're trying to make a record, and there was a lot of craziness involved, and a lot of other things like substances and craziness and all sorts of some. It made it more of a dangerous kind of strange rock and roll scene than I guess I would be more comfortable in.
Yeah.
And so I just knew this is probably not going to be a good band to join. Plus, I had a band already we were getting ready to put out another album. So I, I, I rolled the dice and I said, I just don't feel right about it. And I had to decline the offer, but I definitely I appreciated being offered the gig. But we got a friend of mine the gig, and they liked him, and it ended up lasting about 3 weeks, and then they fired him, and they got in a huge fight, and they all beat themselves up, and in giant Brian Jonestown Massacre, fine form.
Are
But
they still
yeah, they're a
together
trip.
even
They're a
nowadays?
trip. Watch the documentary on them called Dig, and it's just a great rock doc to begin with. But they're
It
just
is.
Anton is just simply one of the most interesting people you'll ever meet. He's
I,
incredible.
I never heard of them. I watched this way back in the day. I had not heard of them at
Yep.
that point. And then I went
Yep.
back and listened to music. And I'm like, oh, they really are good.
Yeah, I mean they're really great. I mean it's was one of those things where like I was always from the school of like I just learned from the Terrabozios and the Vinnie Colaiutas and just the licks and want to be as good enough to play with Zappa drummer.
Yep.
But with that gig it was the opposite of that. It was like act like you can't play. Like literally like forget everything and close your eyes and just sway to the music and let that dictate what you're doing. Stop thinking and just
Like loose form jazz.
yeah, it was a really great school, and the antithesis of what I had grown up learning to do was put it right on the one and two, and be as a drummer, you want to be as precise as possible. But this was not about that. There was no click track involved. It was just like, hey man, roll the tape, let's see what happens, and that was fun, and that was exciting and inspiring, to be able to do that, which is completely different than you normally do.
Sure, everything you've done too carries over now into your production on some level.
Absolutely. I reference them all the time. I still put on records that we did or even records that I didn't do with them, like Anemone, one of my favorite songs that you've heard in a million different TV shows and commercials by them. Uh, Anton's just genius, man. He's just, I'd say mad genius, but I think he's more of a genius than he is mad. He's just great. He just knows how to get certain sounds and certain vibes, and you're just like, wow, that's magic. How's he doing that? He just has a gift. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is really. And so from there, you actually, so you, no, I'm sorry, somebody, William Shatner.
Yeah.
How'd that happen? That's pretty cool.
When I was in LA Guns, I met Brian Pereira, who owns Cleopatra Records, and
Mm-hmm.
Brian and I became friends. And he said, "Hey, man, I heard something that you produced once, and I really thought it sounded good. Would you want to do some work for us?" And I said, "Absolutely." So he pitched me a couple of projects, and they turned out really good. And then we went and had coffee, and I said, I'm thinking about just kind of doing movie music, TV and film, and producing and getting out of LA Guns. And he said, "Well, I'll keep you busy, in the studio if you want to do that, if you're ready to to get off the road." And I said, "Yeah." So one of the first projects he pitched me, he said, "Hey, I got something really interesting to talk to you about. It's William Shatner." And I said,
And
"Sign me up. I don't need to know anything else other
yeah,
than I'm in." And we just went and had a meeting with him, and we all knew the Has Been record that he did with Ben Folds is a
yep,
classic.
yep.
And so I said, I'll be honest with you, if we're going to try to beat that, that sets the bar really high. I think that we're going to be I think we maybe should readjust our focus and try to do something really different. He said, "Well, that's great. That's what I'm thinking. I want to do something, a concept record, but in a completely different light." There's a lot of people that love William Shatner's Has Been, and they won't accept anything else he's done. It's like, that's the only thing he's ever done great. And, I get it. There's people that like certain bands, and there's that one album. But I've gotten to make 3 or 4 records with him now, and we have a blast, and we just laugh the whole time, and we're cracking up, and we have the most amazing guest list of people that are on it. And we get to do something really fun and make some great fun music. So and I'm a fan of the Has Been album as well. I love it, absolutely. But I knew going into it that we were probably going to be up against that. But it's okay. We do what we do, and you try to make something great, and then you walk away from it, and it is what it is.
I would think that maybe people are a little more forgiving. William Shatner fans are from a different group
Yeah,
anyhow.
I
You
would
know,
hope so.
you know,
Yeah.
you know, it's a you're expecting a different level of musicianship.
Yep.
Because he's very tongue in cheek. He gets
Yeah.
it.
Exactly. But at the
He
same
controls it.
time, though, we have some incredible musicians
No,
involved
I
with
get
it.
that too. But I'm saying
Yeah.
he is also aware of who he is, and that's part of his genius. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact
Absolutely.
he does these albums like he was this, and he's like, I think I want to do this now.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. He's a fascinating guy. A fascinating guy.
Yeah,
Me and my wife go over and watch Monday Night Football at his house with his family. He's amazing.
that's awesome. Yeah, I love him. I think he's great. I love the stuff he does.
Yep. I
So
do
it's the fact you
too.
get to do that. So anything coming out with him down the road?
We we haven't really talked about doing another album. You know, the pandemic hit and everything was kind of up in smoke, and so we don't really have any plans to do anything else now. You know, we did a blues album that came out in the fall, and we got a #1 on the Billboard Blues chart, so that was pretty fun.
That's
And
pretty awesome.
yeah, and we had all sorts of great guys on that record. So we'll see. Maybe we'll do something else. I don't know. Time will tell.
You're also doing commercial work, a lot of commercials and
Yep.
soundtracky type of stuff.
Yeah, I just did a song for a Duracell commercial that's on right now, and you know, every day there's something coming down the pipe. It's like, who knows what we're gonna do today? What show we got? We did some stuff for that funny RuPaul's Drag Race show
Mm.
last year, and that show won an Emmy, so that was pretty cool. Did stuff for Wahlburgers, and that show won an Emmy. So you know, we've done some fun stuff. You know, some more serious stuff, but also I like the fun stuff better. You know, that I'm able to laugh at while we watch it, and I can watch with my
Yeah.
kids and stuff. You know,
Cause you done a Family Guy? Is that right? Is that right? You something on
I
the
didn't
Family Guy?
I didn't have a song with the Family Guy, but I had a couple of songs in The Simpsons and a couple of other
Okay.
animated stuff like that.
I must be misinformation out there. Damn
I
you,
love
internet.
the Family Guy. I would have loved to have something in that.
It was literally said the Family Guy. It's like, oh, ask him about that one. That's the
Nice.
second internet's been wrong. I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on with it. So I'm gonna have to talk to somebody who runs it. It's
Yep.
those
Absolutely.
YouTubes, the YouTubes. That is really good. So you're just doing a lot of side work right now, or like small projects because of the COVID.
Yeah, I just, you know, I've just since the pandemic, I've just been working remote. You know, everything I do is if I have to track bands, I send them to Muddy, and they go in his studio and track it, and then he sends me
Mhm.
everything for mixing or whatever else it needs. Or if I'm doing sessions here, like drum sessions, I don't really need anybody else. They'll just send me the track and I play on it. And we're doing a new LA Guns record right now. So Tracy's in Denmark. He's doing his tracks, and he'll send me his tracks, and all the other guys will do their tracks, send them to me, and I'll put them all together here. So Phil's in
That's so
Vegas.
crazy.
Yeah, Phil's in Vegas doing his vocals, and he sends me the tracks, and I'll put it all together. So, and that's kind of how we're doing it for now. So we'll see what happens. But
Now, how you
for
doing
the
the
time,
drums? Because I
huh?
know Scott, how you doing the drums? I know Scott's in. No, he's
Yeah,
in California now,
yeah, I've got
right?
drums on a lot of them, so I'm not sure what we'll do for the final drum takes, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Very good. So I'm gonna put all the links of everything you got going on
Okay,
underneath, and
cool.
if people want to reach out to you for any work or projects,
Absolutely, man. You know, I like to work with anyone and everyone, and I say this every whoever I work with, I say, listen, it doesn't matter if you're Lyle Lovett or Sheryl Crow or LA Guns, or you're an eighth grader who's just learning music. It's like I treat everybody the same, man.
yeah,
I just appreciate being able to make music with other people, and being able to do what I love doing, and I try to show others the same respect, you know, no matter who they are or what skill level they're at, you know.
yeah, it's really cool. You've got a great reputation. So,
Oh, thanks, man.
oh, and when you got new stuff coming on and more production stuff, we'll have you come back and you can promote some of your stuff. All right,
Man,
you'll
that
be a
sounds great.
friend of
Thanks
the
for having
friend of
me,
the
Shane.
show.
I
I
sure
want to thank you.
appreciate, man.
I want to thank you for being on the show, man.
Awesome, man. Thank you
All
so
right, you take
much.
care.
All
Okay,
right.
have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.